UK government scrambling to make sense of new regulations from the United States. That European ban now expanded to include the UK and Ireland.
We got on an escalator and it was just absolutely there were people just piled up at the bottom.
This is what Spain's coronavirus state of emergency looks like in Madrid. With the restrictions, the capital is like a ghost town.
As of Sunday morning, public gatherings will be limited to 10 people, and all leisure and entertainment venues in Israel will be closed.
We have not reached our peak. We will see more cases and we will see more suffering and death.
Live from CNN Atlanta, this is Connect the World.
That's one. This hour, the world going all out to avoid a worst-case scenario. Hello and welcome to Connect the World. I'm Lynda Kinkade, in for Becky Anderson. Good to have you with us. Well, right now, many places are taking drastic measures with everyday life on hold. And the world is waiting to hear what will happen next with coronavirus cases, especially amid warnings that we are far from the peak. The major development this hour is more looming travel restrictions. Citizens of the UK and Ireland are just a day away from the latest US measures. The Trump administration has already suspended travel for 30 days from 26 Schengen countries in Europe. Britain was added to that list after its death toll from the pandemic jumped to 21. In Italy, the hardest hit country in Europe, the death toll jumped by almost 200 on Saturday alone, and its total number of cases is now more than 20,000. While the country washes its hands, its authorities are wringing theirs and moving to put even more restrictions in place. Now, one step includes halting civilian flights at major airports, and that's set to take effect on Monday. Well, on this side of the Atlantic, we've been following the travel chaos overnight in some of America's largest airports as the impact of the White House travel ban starts to hit home. Take a look at this. This is the scene in Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Now, thousands of passengers coming in from multiple international flights. Now, obviously, forget any sense of social distancing. This is the scene, people shoulder to shoulder. Passengers describe being in line there for hours before being screened for the coronavirus, at least having their temperature checked. And no one, not even the staff, knew what was going on. Well, America's top infectious diseases experts is not ruling out support for a temporary U.S. lockdown. Now, just a short time ago, Dr. Anthony Fauci spoke to CNN about getting to grips with the spread of this virus.
The challenge we have right now is how do we blunt that? You know, I've said many times, if you just leave it alone and let the virus to its own devices, it'll go way up and then it'll come down naturally over a period of several weeks. Unfortunately for our colleagues in Italy and in France and certainly in China, that's what happened. Our challenge right now is to do two things, is to prevent the new influx of cases, hence the travel restrictions. And for what we're dealing with right now is to know that we're going to get more infections, but blunt it so that we don't have that sharp peak, that we have more of a smaller hump. Even with that, we're going to have people getting infected.
Well, from Washington to Madrid to Jerusalem and Abu Dhabi, the impacts of the coronavirus hitting nearly every place on the globe. We have our CNN reporters fanned out across the world to bring you the latest on the travel restrictions and measures different countries are taking to fight the spread of COVID-19. Well, it's been about a week since all of Italy went into a dramatic total lockdown, but coronavirus cases there are still spiking. The count has even surpassed South Korea. Now, Italy is the largest known hotspot outside of China. Well, I want to go straight to our Melissa Bell, who joins us live from Rome. Melissa, the death toll there continues to climb by the hundreds every single day. How are people feeling there?
Well, it is very quiet, obviously, in Italy, as you'd imagine. People really respecting that lockdown, even if it does lead to some tension and, of course, an awful lot of psychological strain. I mean, staying entirely confined to your house is a difficult thing to imagine if you're not inside Italy. It could, of course, be coming elsewhere, but it takes its toll. We see it, and I think we really understand it in those moments when they have those flash mobs, the musical moments, when people come to their windows to sing and sense that connection. You can really feel the emotion there. So, of course, it's taking its toll. We've seen some evidence of scuffles breaking out as well outside some of the few places people are allowed to go to buy their bare essentials after people have not respected that social distancing. So people taking it very seriously, but there is a tension tension about it. This is not an easy thing for a country to go through. And yet, as you say, Lynda, for the time being, those efforts are not paying off in terms of the measures of whether this outbreak is being contained. Once again, yesterday, that death toll rose by nearly 200 and a record number of new cases. We were at nearly 3,500. That is a huge jump, Lynda. So it's going to take some time for the efforts of the entire people of Italy to pay off. And that's something that Giuseppe Conte, the Italian Prime Minister, had warned of early on. So it's going to take patience and resilience, and it's going to take, no doubt, another couple of weeks for us to start seeing those figures come down. And we can measure that because when you look at the figures around that initial town in which the outbreak began, where the measures were brought in early, the area of Lodi, which is around the town of Codogno, those figures there are now beginning to stabilize. So it suggests that these measures do work, but they are difficult to bear, and they're going to have to be borne for some time yet nationwide, Lynda.
Exactly, and we are just learning, Melissa, that Easter in the Vatican, while it's still a month away, is going to be essentially cancelled for the public. This is obviously the most significant day on the Christian calendar. Has this ever happened before?
And it's several weeks away, Lynda. It gives you an idea of how long this is going to last. Vatican experts say that it's simply unprecedented. All those key moments around Easter weekend, so important to the Catholic faithful, the washing of feet, the Way of the Cross procession, the Sunday masses themselves, cancelled to the public. They will be live streamed, of course, but that is not the same thing. This Sunday, throughout Italy, for the first time, masses have been cancelled, and after some controversy with the Pope coming out to say that he felt that perhaps extreme measures weren't always the wisest, there has been a slight rowing back. And whilst masses were not held throughout Italy this Sunday morning, Lynda, some churches were open to those who wanted to come in and have individual prayers. So that is a massive disruption in a country as Catholic as this one is. And of course, looking ahead to Easter, that will be another massive disruption. People will only be able to watch the live stream services of the Pope, as they have been able to listen to him on Sundays and Wednesdays over the last couple of weeks. So big changes for a lot of people, not least of which their Sunday habits, their Sunday moment of reflection and prayer. That clearly, for the time being, very much on hold.
Yeah, certainly. All right, Melissa Belforis in Rome, thanks so much. Well, I want to go to Spain now, which is also in lockdown after drastic emergency measures were put suddenly into place. Nationwide, people are now banned from leaving their homes except for essential reasons, like going to the hospital, going to work, a pharmacy, or simply buying food. Now, journalist Goodman joins me now live from Madrid. So we saw this huge spike in the number of infections in Spain in just 24 hours. What are authorities putting that down to? Is it the spread, the rapid spread, or is it simply that they're doing more tests?
There's both of that going on, Lynda, and let me just give you the latest figures. Now more than 7,700 cases, confirmed cases in Spain. That's almost double since just last Friday, a few days ago, which was the day that the Spanish Prime Minister warned the nation that Spain could soon be at 10,000 cases. They're getting there, but only 5% of those confirmed cases are in the intensive care ward, a little less than 400 people. And there have been less than 300 deaths, only 288. Madrid, the capital, has got the brunt of both the number of cases and the deaths right here in the Spanish capital. So that's why the Spanish police this day are really picking it up in terms of trying to enforce the rules that everybody stays at home. They have fines that they can issue of $110 up to $30,000. We've been out taking the pulse of the city. Here's our look. This is what Spain's coronavirus state of emergency looks like in Madrid. A city of 6.6 million people told to stay home, like the whole nation. With the restrictions, the capital is like a ghost town. This gourmet food market, which would normally be packed, is closed like all the other bars and restaurants in town. But it does make it easy to get one of these tourist tuk-tuks. Spain suddenly has the second highest number of infections in Europe after Italy. And Madrid is the hardest hit, with more than half of Spain's cases and fatalities. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez wants to slow down the pace of new infections that officials say could overwhelm hospitals. Under the state of emergency starting late Saturday, the government banned people from leaving their homes except for a few essential activities. They can still go to food stores and pharmacies, but they have to go alone. People can go to work, but driving must be only for essential activities, not for leisure. This man out shopping for food is a medical doctor and a cancer specialist.
Estoy razonablemente preocupado.
I am reasonably concerned, he says, but also reasonably optimistic that this situation could be controlled more quickly than what's being predicted. This butcher says clients are buying extra meat just in case, and there are still supplies for now. As quickly as we open, we might have to close, he says. The government says it will get worse. Many people don't know how this will play out. This couple just arrived from Britain for a birthday celebration weekend. Now they're out searching for food.
I think the virus is spreading and all cities are going to be getting worse, maybe on lockdown sooner than we think.
I think it will be the same all over Europe very quickly.
But the Spanish Prime Minister says not so fast. It will take weeks, he says, but Spaniards working together will stop the virus. And Lynda, here in the Puerto del Sol, the very center of the Spanish capital, normally crowded with people, you can see what it looks like. People confined to their homes. This is the view across the country. Lynda?
Yeah, quite surreal, I imagine there. All right, good to have you with us, Goodman. Thanks so much. We will check in with you again very soon. We've got some news just into us. We've just learned that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been tested for the coronavirus. Now, it comes as Israel is banning public gatherings of more than 10 people as it tries to contain the coronavirus outbreak. Now, the Prime Minister announced restrictions late Saturday, saying that all cafes, restaurants and theatres would close, and urged people to work from home if possible. Well, our Oren Lieberman is in Jerusalem, where that ban has been in effect just for a few hours now. Oren, firstly, just give us some indication of what we know about why the Prime Minister, who we know is 70 years old, was tested for the virus, and when we will know of those results.
Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his office put out a statement a short time ago saying that not only was Netanyahu tested, but all those around him were tested as well. The statement said this was a precautionary measure. There were no indication that anyone was showing symptoms. It was essentially done just to be safe. Let's not forget that just a few weeks ago, Israel was in another election campaign, and during the course of that campaign, Netanyahu was holding nightly events, multiple nightly events, with hundreds of people in attendance, and for that may be part of the reason here why Netanyahu decided to have this coronavirus test. We don't quite know when to expect a result, but again, at this point, the statement says that neither Netanyahu nor anyone close to him are showing symptoms at this time. This comes as Netanyahu has put in place some of the most stringent restrictions we've seen as Israel tries to stay ahead of the coronavirus. It used to be that gatherings were limited to 5,000 people, then 1,000. They're now limited to 20 people in a statement recently from the Prime Minister's office and Netanyahu, who appeared on primetime television to deliver that statement. In addition, restaurants, cafes, leisure and entertainment venues, those are all closed as Israel tries to do what it can to try to make sure the coronavirus doesn't spread anymore. There are about 200 confirmed cases in the country right now, which may not sound like much, but that basically doubled or so in the last 48 hours. Netanyahu also said they may start using counterterrorism tools if he has the permission of the Justice Ministry and the Attorney General. He said that would allow Israel to monitor suspected coronavirus cases, see where they were and who they came into contact with. He acknowledged that this is incredibly controversial and may even constitute a violation of privacy, which is what critics said was one reason it should not be done. But he said that is the level of essentially tools that need to be used here in what he called a war against an invisible enemy.
It certainly is an invisible enemy. All right, Oren Lieberman, thanks so much. We will check in with you again soon. Thanks. Well, in France, voters are headed to the polls Sunday despite the lockdown to fight the coronavirus pandemic. The election seems to be taking a back seat to the virus as the numbers of confirmed cases has doubled in the last 72 hours. Now, the Prime Minister says the lockdown applies to all places that do not perform an essential function. That includes restaurants, theatres and all clubs. Well, journalist Catherine Norris-Trent joins me now live from Paris with more on this. And Catherine, I was quite surprised that these nationwide mayoral elections are still going ahead as planned despite the lockdown. I imagine the turnout has been impacted, especially from those who are older people that are most vulnerable.
Yeah, That's right, Lynda. We know that turnout in these local elections so far, as of midday French time, was down markedly, down around 5% on the last local elections in France, held in 2014. But there have been people turning out at the polling stations. It's not a complete lockdown. There are special precautions put in place at the voting centres. Voters being asked to stand at least 3 feet apart, to bring their own pens, and where they can, ballot papers to vote with them. And there have been regular disinfections of the polling stations and indeed the ballot boxes in between people voting. President Emmanuel Macron was out voting himself. He said people could still come out to do that if they respected the hygiene measures in place. But there's been a lot of controversy about his government's decision to maintain this first round of voting in local elections and not to delay it. A last-minute call from opposition politicians saying that the government should put this off in view of the new sweeping restrictions in place across France. We've even had doctors coming forward saying that they considered it dangerous and it might increase the spread of infections. Nonetheless, that voting taking place amid this backdrop of further restrictions in France. So the government on Saturday night ordered all cafes, restaurants, bars, nightclubs and theatres to close, taking quite a lot of people by surprise. In fact, people learned of that decision on Saturday night on packed-out cafe terraces here in the French capital. Now, France is not on complete lockdown. There are still people out on the streets on what is a beautiful spring Sunday here in the French capital. People going for a stroll or going for a jog, and many people seen at food markets in France. So clearly people still adapting to the new security measures in place and to the habit of social distancing, which is quite a change here in France. They're going to have to get used to it, though, going forward, because travel restrictions are going to come into place. Services of planes, trains and coaches in France are going to be reduced in the next few days. And as of Monday, all schools, colleges and kindergartens in France will be closed as well.
All right, Catherine, we will check in with you again soon. Catherine, Norris-Trent in Paris, thanks so much. We have brought you to London, New York, Jerusalem, Madrid and Rome. The impacts of the virus hitting nearly every place on the globe. Our reporters across the world will continue to bring you the latest this hour and next. And as France and Spain shut down, the United Kingdom is taking a different approach to fighting the virus. Nina Dos Santos writes on CNN.com that Prime Minister Boris Johnson has largely kept Britain open, implementing health measures to delay the virus's peak in the UK. You can read more about the reasoning behind that decision online. Just go to CNN.com. Well, next hour, I'll be speaking to a spokesman for the World Health Organization. There are obviously so many questions as the virus spreads right around the globe. We'll get you answers right from the source. That interview right here on CNN's Connect the World next hour. But still to come, countries in the Middle East are slowly catching up to Europe by enforcing lockdowns, shutdowns and the complete suspension of travel. We're going live in the region with all the details for you. And should you stay or should you go? Those are the questions many people are asking about upcoming vacations. We're going to look at some of the factors to think about before you take to the skies. Plus,
if you look at those curves, I mean, they kind of go like this, and then all of a sudden like this. That's what you're preparing for here?
That's right. CNN's chief medical correspondent gets an exclusive look at how the hardest hit town in New York is working to curb the coronavirus pandemic. Stay with us. You're watching Connect the World.